Like I always say, one of my favorite things to do on this channel is to make things that are like special to people, like from sentimental materials and whatnot. And I'm really fortunate that I get to do that quite a bit. And then my other favorite thing to do is to make things that don't really exist, that you can't just go to a store and get, because who else is going to do it? Some of you may have seen some of my videos about like some of the electric Chinese instruments that I've made, and then I also just have some of my own weird ideas that I make. But so today's video is about someone else's weird idea that I'm going to make, and I'm super excited about it. Normally when I make the build video, I just kind of jump to the part where we've already dotted all our I's and crossed all our T's and figured out how to make this thing that doesn't really exist, and I just make it. But I thought I'd kind of do a little bit more of an in-depth and almost like behind the scenes type of approach to this project here. So today's video is going to focus on everything that happens before I even start cutting in order to design an instrument that doesn't really exist yet. Let's go. So I was contacted by a young lady who said she wanted a 12 nylon string acoustic guitar, but the size of a mandolin, and I said sign me up. But first I wanted to make sure this was even possible, and figured the best way to do that was to start by just throwing a couple strings on something and seeing what would happen. This is a silly little instrument that I made for like a CNC project a bunch of years ago. This is a 20-inch scale little kind of twang stick that I made, and what I just did is I just put 2 nylon strings tuned to low E and high E right down the middle of it. And it's not a great instrument, but it gives us the idea. I think it might be possible. Nope. Both strings are ringing. The tension seems okay. I think this is in around this 19-20-inch scale. I think this is something we could probably make actually happen. Armed with the knowledge I got from that test, we went back and forth and decided we needed to make something a little bit bigger than a mandolin, and we settled on a 19-inch scale, and I started designing an instrument around that based on my acoustic guitar design, but obviously smaller and with some other specific features to it. The client wanted a reference to some really cool Legend of Zelda graphics, but not on the nose, more like a nod to it, not like a Zelda themed instrument. So we actually took these kind of cool shapes from the Zelda logo and put them into this fingerboard in this kind of fun pattern. Here, I'll show you what the Zelda logo looks like right now so you can kind of see where it's coming from. I don't play the game, so I don't know what all this stuff means, but you can see there's this kind of really cool eye symbol, and we didn't want to just pinpoint it as like being exactly that, and so we took those shapes around the eye and extrapolated those into position markers. And then there's also this little badge symbol we used. So with all this stuff roughly designed, I made some cuts on my Thunder Laser just out of some sheets of cardboard. They're actually the sheets that I keep in stock for making guinea pig tanks. In this way, I can see the actual size of the instrument and get a better sense of how it's going to look proportionally and feel than I can get from looking at a computer screen. I imagine some people can figure that all out from a computer screen, but I really find it's very beneficial to put the actual size model in my hand. I checked my measurements on the computer to make sure I was lining it all up right and just used some two-sided tape to put it together. So I could actually feel it in the real world. I want to see if I can make this headstock any smaller, and line up actual headstocks on it. But more importantly, I want to see how it felt to play, because since the instrument's so little, if we hold it like a normal guitar here, it's kind of low. And so I thought by adding this little cut here, it might make it a little more convenient to play, which I think it does. I think that's actually a pretty good spot there. We can put it on either leg. And of course there'll be strap holders on it too, so you could always just... I'm 6'2", so everything looks small next to me, and I know my client is definitely not 6'2", so I had my son, who's now 13, Vance, pose with it to give a better representation of scale. What a ham. So now with the proof of concept design approved by the client via photos back and forth and email discussions, it's time to start looking at some material options. So I started digging through my collection of assorted pieces of wood to look at what might be the best fit for building this instrument. The client expressed interest in making the inlays glow in the dark, kind of like a video game would have those sort of glowing effects, and so we did some experiments with some Total Boat epoxy and some black diamond pigments to see what would look best in both natural light and in glowing situations. I used a piece of black plastic because I was kind of thinking that the fingerboard was going to be black. We'll get to that in a second here. As you can see, I'm starting to lay out some of the different materials that I have on hand that I think would be a good fit for the instrument, and cleaning them up a little bit, maybe spraying some water on them here and there to simulate finish, and sending all these pictures to the client to let them pick what is going to be their favorite material. Here you can see what some of my experiments look like in natural light, and then I went over to a dark part of my shop and took a picture of them again. You see some clear differences in appearances. The baby blue color on the top left of the screen is very similar to how these shapes appear to glow in the actual video game, so we're going to go with that. We wanted to make sure that they would look okay in normal light too, and so there you can see that there will be enough contrast to see them even if you're just playing in regular light. So now we have our color scheme and our materials picked, but I'm still not ready to start building the actual instrument because there are some things about this body design that are new to me. I need to make some molds and figure out the best way to bend all these sides and everything. So I go over to my Thunder Laser again, and I started making some quick simple molds out of 1/4 inch MDF. Since this whole instrument's only going to be a couple inches thick, I just had to cut 2 of each of these to make the molds a 1/2 inch thick, and I figured that would be enough to give me the strength and security that I need to work, and figure it all out from there. But I realized after I cut the molds that I needed to have like a little bit of a relief spot to run excess material, because there's going to be sort of some more corners in here than like a typical dreadnought shaped acoustic guitar. Notice I put these little holes in for alignment. Just drop some dowels in there to make sure it's all lined up. So now I just wanted to make sure that these molds were going to work before I started making the actual thing. I'm using some of my favorite laser curved hollow core door material to figure out where the bends are going to be too sharp and how I'm going to join the corners, the best way to overlap, the actual lengths the pieces need to be. All these little things I need to figure out before I make the client's instrument. I also need to figure out sort of the order of operations and if I need to make any more edits to my clamps. And I decided I'm just going to glue one together and see what happens, because it's a couple hours of my time, maybe, very little material cost, and we'll take it from there, you know. I used my laser to cut some hardwood scraps that I had laying around to make my tail block and little pieces to stick into those corners to make sure I can seam those up nice. But then for the actual neck block where the neck is going to bolt in there, I went over to my CNC machine and cut an actual solid block of maple for that. I forgot I had these big rubber bands that I hardly ever use that were pretty convenient for sort of snugging everything up and making sure everything was aligned as I glued in all those little pieces of wood I just cut. And I just did the kerfing the traditional way. Nothing fancy there. I think you'll start to see why getting something custom built often costs more than just buying something off the shelf. Like even for me, like I sell my guitars for a pretty reasonable price from my web store, but then these commission builds do cost more because they're really getting this attention to detail. Often lots of things being made behind the scenes, and every sort of inch of it is being custom built. Even if I'm just building a custom version of one of the guitars I've already designed that we know all that stuff works, there's still these extra layers and levels that go into that custom build that make it truly special to the client. I'm going to try and use my bandsaw as a green screen here to tell you about how this video is made possible, and quite simply put, it is made possible because of you. Thank you all very much to the people who support me over on patreon.com/TimSway, as well as you who shops at my stores, squaretools.com, where I sell all the tools that I design and make and use on this website, as well as newperspectivesmusic.com, where I sell the guitars that I make here, as well as the parts and accessories like my hand wound pickups and stuff. That's how I make these videos possible. I really avoid having corporate sponsors, and every once in a while you'll see one here, but those are special occasions. They're usually people that I reached out to, or simply put, friends of mine. Back to the show. This was really beneficial going through the steps, and I'm hoping I'll actually be able to use this body, and much like on the last guitar that I just made out of that special piano wood, where I made a guitar out of closet doors alongside for practice, I think I'll try to finish this instrument as well, warts and all. But so, I've feeling a lot more confident about the design, and then I also wanted to just cut a quick top and back, which I'm going to have to redo, unfortunately, because I was using some scraps of closet door wood that I had laying around, and they weren't quite big enough, so some of the edges were kind of snipped off. But I took what I had and just sort of taped it on there. There's no bracing or anything in there yet, just to really get a sense of what it looked like with that neck cut from MDF. So there you can see in a nutshell the abbreviated sort of version of what happens before I start turning on the cameras around here usually. You know, it starts with the idea and the conversation with the client, which turns into some sharing some pictures and some sketches, which then turns into, you know, sort of a little bit of a real loose cardboard mock-up, which then turns into actually doing a little R&D and some prototyping to make some actual physical parts to problem solve all those issues that might arise. And we can see here we have a pretty accurate representation of what the final instrument is going to be like, and I've made a few mistakes that I've corrected in my processes, so when it's time to start doing the part that I usually film, and I will film for this one, I'm ready. So see you next time. Be good.